see him.
Good evening, everybody. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Michael Aaron. I am the chair of Sullivan County Republican. For those of you who do know me, my name is still Michael Aaron and chair of Sullivan County Republican. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As the chair of Sullivan County Republicans, I am excited when all of our presidential candidates come to Sullivan County, and this is the time that they're coming. It is my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, former governor of South Carolina, former ambassador to the United Nations. Please welcome Ambassador Nikki Haley.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's great to be back in New Hampshire. It's great to see all of you here. Thank you for taking the time to come. I see so many new faces, and I want to tell you this part of New Hampshire is just as beautiful as the rest, so you are blessed. I was born and raised in a small rural town in South Carolina, 2,500 people, 2 stoplights. You couldn't think about doing something wrong without somebody already telling your mom. Right. But we learned a lot in that small town. We were the only Indian family in that small southern town. We weren't white enough to be white. We weren't black enough to be black. They didn't know who we were, what we were, or why we were there. And I remember when I would get teased on the playground, my mom would always say, your job is not to show them how you're different. Your job is to show them how you're similar. And it's amazing how our country could use my mom's advice right now. Yeah. My mom started a business out of the living room of our home. 30 plus years later, it was a successful company. I started doing the books for the family business when I was 13. Wasn't until I got to college that I realized that was child labor. I went on to, I don't even want to say this, I feel so bad. I went on to Clemson University, and if you watched the game last night, my heart is still broken from our loss to Duke. But go Tigers, next week it'll be better. And graduated with a degree in accounting. So like many of the fellas, they are lawyers. I am an accountant. Accountants are problem solvers. And then I went and worked for a company, and then I came back home to the family business. And one day I was sitting with my mom, telling her how hard it was to make $1 and how easy it was for government to take it. And my mom said, quit complaining about it, do something about it. I truly did not know you weren't supposed to run against a 30-year incumbent in a primary. Ignorance is bliss. Once I realized he was related to half the district, the only option was to win. So I went around the district and said, we have way too many lawyers at the State House. I think they need a really good accountant. And they took a chance on me, and we won. When I got to the State House, we got to work. But in South Carolina, they passed most everything by a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. But one day they decided to pass a bill that would give legislators a pay raise. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, silence. The ayes have it. Yet to this day, you can't find anyone that says they voted themselves a pay raise. And I was furious because we had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican governor. And I filed a bill that said anything important enough to be debated on the floor of the House or the Senate is important enough for people to know how their legislators voted. And the speaker told me, put the bill away. We don't need to have it. We will decide what the public needs to see and what they don't. And so I went around the state and told everyone, did you know of all the bills passed in the House, only 8% were on the record? Of all the bills passed in the Senate, only 1% was on the record. So if you didn't know how your House member voted 92% of the time, if you didn't know how your senator voted 99% of the time, how did you know who to vote for when you went to the polls? And the people of South Carolina were shocked. To put it in perspective, my first year in office, I was chairman of the freshman class, second year majority whip, third year on a powerful business committee, fourth year I was subcommittee chair of banking. The year that I wouldn't put the bill away, they stripped me of everything. I could take the well, no one would hear me speak. I could file a bill, no one would co-sponsor. So I ran for governor. And I'm proud to say one of the first bills we signed into law is now in South Carolina. Everything debated on the floor of the House or the Senate requires a legislative vote on the record, and we took it a step further and we did it on every section of the budget as well. And when I was doing the bill signing, as you heard, I love music, so we blasted throughout the State House, Pat Benatar's "Hit Me With Your Best Shot." When I became governor, South Carolina was hurting. We had double-digit unemployment. We had thousands of people on welfare. And South Carolina was the butt of the jokes. And so we got to work. We went and we focused on making sure our agencies, we redid all of our agencies, we pulled all the bureaucracy down, we told them if they were costing a person or a business time, they were costing them money, and that was no longer acceptable. And then we started bringing in businesses and recruiting. By the time I left, we were building planes with Boeing. We were building more BMWs than any place in the world. We brought in Mercedes-Benz. We brought in Volvo, 5 international tire companies. They were referring to us as the beast of the Southeast, which I love. We moved our unemployment from 11% down to 4%. We announced jobs in every county in the state. And we said, if you have to show picture ID to buy Sudafed, if you've got to show picture ID to get on a plane, you should have to show a picture ID to protect the integrity of the election process. And we passed voter ID in South Carolina. We passed one of the toughest illegal immigration laws in the country. We required an E-Verify system where every business had to prove that every person they hired was in our country legally. And by the time I left being governor, we were named the friendliest state in the country, the most patriotic state in the country, and the #2 state in the country people were moving to. And then I got the call for the United Nations. And I honestly said, I don't even know what the UN does. I just know everybody hates it. Right? But when you get the chance to serve your country, you jump. And so when I got to the UN, I wanted countries to know what America was for and what America was against. I didn't care if they didn't like me, but I wanted them to respect America. And we got to work. We pulled ourselves out of the Iran deal. I led the negotiations to pass the largest set of sanctions against a country in a generation with North Korea, while negotiating with China and Russia. We moved our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And during that move, the entire world condemned us. And I was proud to issue one of the first US vetoes in years. But I was mad because we have the right to put our embassy anywhere we want. We always put it in the capital of every country. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. We were acknowledging a truth. But I went to my office and I told my staff, I said, I want you to put a book together. The first column, I want you to list all 193 countries that belong to the UN. I want the second column to be the percentage of times they voted with the US and against the US. And I want the third column to be how much foreign aid we give them. I took that book and I gave it to President Trump. He lost his mind. He's flipping pages, he's yelling out countries. And I said, look, I'm not saying that you give foreign aid based on a percentage vote at the UN. But that should be one of the things we look at. Stop trying to buy friends. Stop paying off enemies. Do you know last year we gave $50 billion in foreign aid? You know who we gave it to? Pakistan, that harbored terrorists that tried to kill our soldiers. Iraq, that has Iranian influence that says death to America. Zimbabwe, the most anti-American African country there is. We gave money to Belarus, who's holding hands with Russia as they invade Ukraine. We gave money to communist Cuba, who we named a state sponsor of terrorism, who is now putting a spy center up with China. And the biggest kick in the gut, we gave money to China. How embarrassing do we look? How weak do we look? When I am president, we will no longer give money to countries that hate America. We have to know what is in our best interest. So now I'm running for president, and I don't need to tell you how bad things are. You don't have to turn on the news to see it. We are $32 trillion in debt. We are having to borrow money just to make our interest payments. China owns some of that debt. And I would love to tell you that Biden did that to us. And while he's done a whole lot to us, I've always spoken in hard truths. Our Republicans did that to us too. You go back and look at that $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill that they passed with no accountability. They expanded welfare that has now left us with 90 million Americans on Medicaid, 42 million Americans on food stamps. And did Republicans try and make it right? They alone opened up earmarks again for the first time in 10 years, pushing through 7,000 of them in December. Want to know how they spent your money? $30 million on an honors college in Vermont. $10 million to tear down a hotel in Alaska. $7.5 million on a courthouse in Colorado. And the list goes on. The 2024 appropriations budget just came out. Republicans have $7.4 billion worth of earmarks and port projects in there. Democrats have $2.8 billion. You tell me who the big spenders are. All while 1 in 6 American families can't afford their utility bill. Over 61% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of American families can't afford diapers. What are we doing? Doesn't make sense. There's no value for a dollar. Then you go and you look at our education system. Everybody wants to blame COVID for education. We had problems with education before COVID. Pre-COVID, 67% of 8th graders in our country were not proficient in reading or math. Think about that. A couple of months ago, it came out that over 80% of our 8th graders aren't proficient in history or civics. And then a couple of weeks ago, it comes out that our 13-year-olds are scoring the lowest in reading and math than we've seen in decades. I don't think that had anything to do with COVID. And now you look at how far behind our kids have become. Then you go and you look at the border situation. And let me tell you, I've been to the border. And I haven't pulled a come or go and come back. I went 400 miles down that border. You're not ready for what I saw. Mounds of clothing, mounds of shoes, paraphernalia, rape areas that the women and girls have to walk through. When you get up in the morning, you get your coffee and you watch the news. When these ranchers get up in the morning, they get their coffee and they go see if anyone died crossing their fence. They pick up whatever little kids were left behind and turn them over to Border Patrol. I met with multiple sheriffs. They said before 7 a.m. they round up whatever illegal immigrants they can find, turn them over to Border Patrol. Border Patrol documents them and releases them until their court date years from now. And when I asked Border Patrol about their job, they said, "You want to know what we do? We're glorified babysitters. They don't let us do our job." 5.5 million illegal immigrants have crossed the border. We had enough fentanyl cross that border last year that would kill every single American. 75,000 people died of fentanyl last year. And don't think for a second China doesn't know what they're doing when they send it over. And then my mom always said, you know what? You've got to take care of those who take care of you. I'm going to ask you if we're taking care of those who take care of us. Right now in America, 33,000 of our veterans are homeless. 1 in 3 veterans suffers from PTSD or thoughts of suicide. We lose 22 heroes a day to suicide. That's shameful. So that's a lot of bad, right? It's hard to find anything good there. And Congress is supposed to be doing this for you, right? What has Congress done for you lately? I can tell you what we need to do with Congress. I think it's time that we have term limits in America and make sure that they... I think we need to have mental competency tests for anyone over the age of 75. I have said that. And the key is, I'm not being disrespectful when I say that. We all know active, vibrant 75-year-olds, and we all see Biden, right? I don't mind if you do mental competency tests for anyone over the age of 50. But these are people in DC making decisions on our national security. They're making decisions on the future of our children's economy. We need to know they're at the top of their game. And these are basic tests. These are tests where you say, what town were you born in? Name 4 words that start with the same letter. How many grandchildren do you have? We need to know that we've got people who can answer those. You're laughing. I don't know why you're laughing. But you know, as bad as all of that is, now I'm going to tell you what I told South Carolinians when I became governor. No more whining. No more complaining. Now we get to work. How do we fix it? When it comes to the economy, let's claw back the $500 billion of unspent COVID dollars that are out there. Instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after middle America, let's go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud that we know exist. We need to make sure that we stop the spending, stop the borrowing, eliminate the earmarks. I will veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels. And then as a governor, I know the importance of doing this. We will move so many of those programs in the federal government down to the states where you can empower the people. You will dramatically reduce the size of the federal government, and you will empower people on the ground. That's how you go and take care of things. There's too much of a distance between the federal government and you. I'm tired of working for government. Government was intended to secure the rights and freedoms of the people. It was never meant to be all things to all people. We'll get our economy back on track. Then when it comes to our education, you know, in South Carolina, we knew if a child couldn't read by 3rd grade, they were 4 times less likely to graduate high school. So we started holding our kids back. We need to do that across the country. We set up reading remediation programs. We brought in their parents and we set those kids up for success. We've got to do that all over this country if we're going to save our kids. And we need to make sure that there is complete transparency in the classroom. No child should ever be taught or had something said to them that the parents don't know about, period. Parents should be able to decide where their kids go to school. We have one job. We know how to do it. Every child deserves a good education. No child should be dictated based on where they're born and raised. And then let's build things in America again. Let's put vocational classes back in our high schools and teach our kids to build the things that we want to make. I did that in South Carolina. We had apprenticeships all over our state. Our kids learned how to build those planes and cars and tires. That's the way we will get them back on track. And then when it comes to the border, we'll do across this country what I did in South Carolina. We'll do a mandatory E-Verify program. We will make sure we defund sanctuary cities once and for all. 45,000 Border Patrol agents on the ground and let them do their job. We will go back to the Remain in Mexico policy because guess what? Nobody wants to remain in Mexico. And instead of catch and release, we'll go to catch and deport. That is how we will stop the bleeding of what's happening. And when it comes to our veterans, I am the wife of a combat veteran. My husband deployed to Afghanistan. They deserve better than what they're getting right now.
Damn right.
Do you know the average amount of time for a veteran to get a doctor's appointment at the VA? 29 days. Why 29 days? Because on the 30th day, they get to go to any doctor or hospital of their choice. So halfway through the 29 days, they're called and rescheduled, and the 29 days starts all over again. So much of what happens in a transition. We all see when our military service men and women come home. It's a great day. It's a true blessing when we can hug our loved ones and know that they're safe. But the hard work begins when we go home. When my husband came home, he couldn't hear loud noises. He couldn't be in crowds. Life had passed him by the year and we had gone on with our lives without him, and he couldn't transition. We need to make sure that we love them when they're home, not just when they're gone. And the way we do that is we will make sure we have telehealth so that they can have mental health care every day the second that they need it. We will make sure that they can go to the doctor and hospital of their choice because they've earned that right. We will make sure that their GI benefits can go towards other things besides education. And we will make sure that their spouses are taken care of so that they never have that burden to worry about how their spouse is going to get care. And the other thing we're going to do, we're going to make sure every member of Congress has to get their health care from the VA, and you watch how quick they do. It'll be the best health care in the country. But we owe that to our veterans. So those are the domestic issues. Now let's talk about national security. It's a mess. Did you ever think we'd look at the sky and see a Chinese spy balloon looking back at us? It's a national embarrassment. You've got Russia invading Ukraine, you've got Iran building a bomb, you've got North Korea testing ballistic missiles, you've got China on the march. But make no mistake, none of that would have happened had we not had that debacle in Afghanistan. The idea that my husband and his military brothers and sisters who served had to sit there and watch the U.S. leave Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night without telling our allies who stood shoulder to shoulder with us for decades because we asked them to be there. Think about what that told our friends. More importantly, think about what that told our enemies. Now you go and you look at the situation and you can't be that surprised. But let's not forget, the biggest threat that faces us is China. China has been planning war with us for years, and that's not being dramatic. Look at what they're doing now. They are already in this country. They've bought 400,000 acres of U.S. soil, most recently near Grand Forks Air Force Base, where our most sensitive drone technology is. They're spending millions of dollars in our universities, stealing our research and spreading Chinese propaganda. Chinese front companies are lobbying our members of Congress on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. You've had more fentanyl cross the border than what we lost in the Iraq, Vietnam, and Afghanistan wars combined. Then you look at the technology that they're getting. We know there is certain technology that builds up China's military and threatens America. Yet the Biden administration approved 70% of it last year. And then you look at the military. China has been building their military and modernizing it so that it can take over. They now have the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 350 ships. They're going to have 400 ships in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. They're doing nuclear. They're doing artificial intelligence. They're doing space. They have developed hypersonic missiles. We've barely gotten started. They are now the biggest developer of neurostrike weapons. Those are engineered to change brain activity, to disable military commanders and segments of the population. They're now putting a spy center just off the coast of Florida in Cuba. And you wait, Chinese military are going to show up there soon. We need to wake up to what they're doing. So the way I'll fix it, first of all, no more selling U.S. soil to China, and we take back what they've already taken from us. We will go to our universities and we say you either take Chinese money or American money, but the days of taking both are over, and we get that Chinese infiltration out of our schools. No more foreign lobbying to Congress, period. That's what ambassadors are for. We need to stop any foreign entity from lobbying our members of Congress, and we will eliminate that. We will make sure that when it comes to technology, that list of technology we know China's not supposed to have, we will blacklist it and stop any of that from going over there. And when it comes to fentanyl, we'll go to China and we'll say we will end all normal trade relations with you until you stop killing Americans. And you watch how fast they fix that. They know exactly how to. And we will strengthen our military. We will strengthen it by making sure that we modernize our military, and that means you bring down the bureaucracy in the Department of Defense. You take away the favorites that they do with certain companies, and you take away all the craziness. Stop making our men and women have to take gender pronoun classes. It's demoralizing to them. There were 2 things when I was at the United Nations that Russia, China, and our enemies never wanted us to have. They never wanted us to be energy independent, and they never wanted us to have a strong military. We will do both of those. First of all, from an energy side, no more going hat in hand to Saudi Arabia, no more getting dirty oil from Iran and Venezuela. We will not only be energy independent, we will be energy dominant. The second thing is, strong militaries don't start wars, strong militaries prevent wars. This is about prevention. And the way you handle China is with strength, by being strong. That's why this Russian-Ukrainian war matters. I know there's a lot of debate on whether we should be there or whether we shouldn't. But remember what we all witnessed. Putin and Xi stood holding hands before the Olympics and named themselves unlimited partners. A couple of months ago, when the Russian plane knocked down the U.S. drone, who showed up in Russia? President Xi showed up in Russia. Now you hear that Kim Jong-un has shown up in Russia because he's giving weapons to Russia for Ukraine. Remember, a win for Russia is a win for China. We know that. And Ukraine is winning. We saw here was this free country that was invaded, and the world gave them 5 days. But they had a spirit and a passion to save their country that the men went there and immediately went to the front lines and started fighting. The women said, I'm not going to stay back. They started making Molotov cocktails to help their husbands. And then you go and you look at the fact, look at what they've done. We know Putin's hit rock bottom because he's getting drones from Iran and missiles from North Korea. They've raised the draft age in Russia to 65. They're now getting Russians off the streets and handing them shovels to fight with. We have eliminated 50% of Russia's force. Now, I don't think we should give Ukraine cash. I don't think we give any country cash. I don't think we put troops on the ground. But I think we work with our allies to make sure they have the equipment and the ammunition to win. The amount of money that the U.S. has spent on the Ukrainian war, is 3.5% of our total defense budget. Just 3.5%. If you took a percentage of GDP, 11 European countries have spent more than us. That's a pretty good return on investment to know that we're preventing war. Because dictators always do what they tell you they're going to do. China said they were going to take Hong Kong, we watched them. Russia said they were going to move into Ukraine, they did it. China says Taiwan's next, we better believe them. Russia said once they've taken Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries. That puts us at war. We are trying to prevent war. And if we prevent war, and if Ukraine wins, that sends the best message to China about taking Taiwan. It sends a message to North Korea about testing ballistic missiles. It sends a message to Iran about building a bomb. But if Ukraine loses, it's all going to start happening. And then we're really talking about troops on the ground and money involved and all of that. So let's just finish it before all that starts. That's the reason national security matters. And we have to have a strong America. You can't appease dictators. You can't be friendly with them. Because when their lips are moving, they're lying to you. And if you don't get that, you're being naive. So we have the solutions on what we need to do to get America back on track. But the first thing we're going to have to tackle is this national self-loathing that has taken over our country. The idea that they say America's bad or rotten or racist. I was elected the first female minority governor in the country. America's not racist, we're blessed. Our kids need to know to love America. They need to be saying the Pledge of Allegiance when they start school every day. You know, a couple of months ago, I dropped my husband off at 4 a.m. for another year-long deployment. And I watched him and 230 soldiers pick up their 2 duffel bags of belongings to go to a country they'd never been, all in the name of protecting America. If they're willing to sacrifice their lives and their families because they still believe in this amazing experiment that is America. So if they're willing to fight for her there, shouldn't we be willing to fight for America here? We have a country to save. But in order to do that, we've got to accept some hard truths. Republicans have lost the last 7 out of 8 popular votes for president. That's nothing to be proud of. We should want to win the majority of Americans. Our solutions are the right ones. But you don't do it by pushing people away. You do it by opening the tent. We need more people in. We need young people. We need women. We need African Americans. We need Asians. We need Hispanics. And you don't go to them and say, you should be with us. You go to them and say, what do you care about? Guess what? They all care about their kids' education. They all care about having opportunities for their kids than what they had. They all want a safe America that's strong abroad. So we could do this. But in order to really take America back, it's going to take a lot of courage. Courage from every single person in this room. Courage for me to run. And courage for every one of you to know, don't complain about what happens in a general election if you don't play in this primary. It matters. It matters. Someone asked me why I was running. And I said, my parents came here 50 years ago to an America that was strong and proud and full of opportunities. I want them to know that country again. I'm doing this for my husband, Michael, and his military brothers and sisters. They need to know their sacrifice matters, that we do love our country. I'm doing this for my daughter who just got married, and I saw how hard it was for her and her husband to buy a home. And I'm doing this for my son, who's a senior in college this year, and I am tired of watching him write papers of things he doesn't believe in just to get an A. That's not us. That's not our country. And for the first time, 78% of Americans don't think their kids are going to live as good of a life as we did. We can't be okay with that. I'm not okay with that. We have a country to save. But if you will join me, if you're willing to get into this fight, I promise you, our best days are still to come. Thank you so much. God bless you. To sit and listen to me. So now we will turn the tables on you. We will open the floor for questions. There is nothing I won't answer. You may not like my answer, but there is nothing I won't answer. Andrew has the microphone. And Andrew, I will let you go ahead and start. We've got one here, one back in the back, one back in the back.
Hi. You said some pretty harsh things about President Trump on that debate stage. And so people are wondering if you were lying when you raised your hand to say you would support him, even if he were in jail.
I raised my hand on that stage.
Can you raise your hand with us to say that you would support President Trump, even if he was in jail?
I raised my hand on that stage. I raised my hand because the Republican nominee is better than a President Kamala Harris. And I will say that every day of the week. But let me say something past that. Because I don't say harsh things out of being personal. I'm not that type of person. I speak hard truths. So I had a great working relationship with President Trump. We did a lot of great work in terms of foreign policy. The reason I was able to get out of there without a tweet was because I told him the truth. So when he was doing something good, I rallied, I worked hard, I tried to serve our country the very best I could. And when he was doing something wrong, he'll tell you, I showed up in his office or I picked up the phone and I would say, you cannot do this. Instead, you could do X, Y, or Z. I always gave him options. And he would always say, well, how do you see that playing out? And I would tell him. So he appreciated that I wasn't a yes person to him. When I decided to run after watching the debacle in Afghanistan, after seeing what inflation was doing to our American families, and after we lost the midterms. That was my breaking point. When we lost the midterms, and I knew that we had lost the Senate, that was it. I knew for the sake of my kids and yours that we needed to do something. And so I stand by that. So the only thing I've ever said about Trump is where I disagree with him. We had $8 trillion worth of spending on his watch. And through that, Republicans and Democrats spent like drunken sailors. And our kids will never forgive us for that if we don't get that under control. He did a great job getting Republicans and Democrats to realize the threat in China. But he only focused on trade. He missed the fact they were infiltrating our country by buying our land, by going through our universities, by stealing our intellectual property, and he didn't do anything about it. I disagree on the fact that he thinks let Putin have whatever part of Ukraine he wants. No. Because guess what? China's going to think they can have whatever part of Taiwan. And then that's coming to us. So anything I disagree with the president on, it's on policy. I actually called him when I was running for president for 2 reasons. 1, it was the right thing to do. He had given me the job. And 2, I wanted him to know I was in it to win it. I told him that we needed a new generational leader, that we needed to leave the negativity and the baggage of the past, and we needed to move forward in our country. And I stand by that. And so while I think he was the right president at the right time, and I support many of his policies, I think it's time for our country to move forward because we can't continue to be living in the past.
disrespect.
No disrespect taken.
Well, I just wanted to tell you, during the 2016 elections and stuff, when you were on the debate stage,
I wasn't on the
2020 then, I'm sorry.
I wasn't on the debate stage then either.
I swear you had,
You know what? That was Tulsi Gabbard. Don't confuse me.
No.
Come on now, come on.
I remember some of the things that you had said at one time about how you felt about President Trump and stuff, and it's, I don't get phone calls.
That might be Tulsi calling.
But I really did think that you had an axe to grind or whatever.
I
and-
don't.
No. Hear me out. My feeling was that you didn't care for Trump, and I understand that. But you know, he did a lot of good things for a guy that had nothing but opposition against him. I was amazed at how many things he actually got done. I would really like to tell you that I've got nothing but the utmost respect for you after watching that debate the other night. And you can't tell me you weren't on that debate stage.
Yeah,
I
that's
did
what
have a
was
beer
funny
that
about
night, but it
that
wasn't
debate.
enough to take my memory away. I would really like to see you be able to succeed. I don't have a problem with a woman going into the White House. I think we probably would get a lot more accomplished. And I would like to see maybe if you considered somebody like Kristi Noem or the governor of Iowa as one of your cabinet or a vice president, because I think an awful lot could get accomplished.
Thank you. I think that means you're a fan of women. I'm just going to go there. So you know, to go back to what you said about Trump, you know what I've found interesting is people want me to love him 100% of the time, or they want me to hate him 100% of the time. The media wants me to hate him 100% of the time. Trump supporters want me to love him 100% of the time. I don't agree with anyone 100% of the time. So I'm always going to be very, very honest in everything, and you'll always get what I'm thinking. The only thing that you may be thinking of that I criticize, he thinks January 6th was a beautiful day. I think it was a terrible day. And so that's one thing that I have always. But I have been on record as saying he was the right president at the right time, and I saw he never got a moment's peace or an ounce of credit. He never did. You know, when it comes to my presidential pick or cabinet members, you know, I'll tell you, just like when I was governor. When I was governor, I always think, you know, people always are like, what are you going to do with Congress first? That's the wrong question. You control what you can control first. And so what I did as governor, I replaced the head of every agency. That's what I will do as president. We'll replace the head of every single agency. As governor, I sent people into every agency to clean it up. Pull down regulations, pull down bureaucracy, and get rid of problem children. And in some cases that meant we tweaked agencies, in some cases that meant we gutted agencies. We're going to have to gut the Department of Justice, we're going to have to gut the Intelligence Departments, we're going to have to do a lot of work on some other ones. But we will do it. And education as well, we'll send all that down to the states. But what I did also is, I didn't appoint people to my cabinet that even necessarily voted for me. I appointed people who I knew understood their constituency. I told them three things. I said, I want you to be creative, I want you to serve the people, and if you see me doing something wrong, tell me. And I required them every 90 days, they had to hit benchmarks that showed the people of the state their return on investment. I saw that all those agencies were spending money because they were worried they wouldn't get the same amount in the budget the next year. And when I would walk into those agencies, you open closets and there were towers of computers, towers of printers, paper. And so what I did was I put all their spending online, and I incentivized them to start giving money back to the taxpayers. And then they actually started to compete. That's what we need to do with government, is get it working again. So I will tell you, with my cabinet heads or my VP pick, I'm not going to worry about whether it's a man or a woman. I'm not going to worry about what race that person is. I'm going to worry about, are they willing to really go into the trenches and do the job to prove to the American people that they're in it for the right reasons. That's it. I have no other criteria. And for my vice president, one, it will be someone who could do the job. God help us with Kamala Harris. And then secondly, it'll be someone who makes me stronger. Someone where we can be a force together. And so that's my promise to you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I want to let you know that the reason why I'm here tonight is because of the debate and you telling the hard truths. We haven't had a politician to say the hard truths that need to be said. My concern is you can say, and you have a lot of great ideas, you can say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but when Congress isn't working, how can you get your ideas through when Republicans don't want to work with the Democrats and they just want to blame each other, and it's been a standstill for years and years and years? How can you change that?
So I had a similar situation when I became governor. And so the first thing, in going and cleaning out your agencies, when you do that, your legislature or Congress takes notice because you've done the work first. So the first thing, when they go and see me rolling heads in agencies and cleaning it up and making them show a return on investment, it sends a message to Congress that they have to do the same thing. They have to also show the taxpayers a return on investment. They have to also give money back. They have to control the spending. They have to balance a budget because all the rest of us have to balance a budget. So it sets the tone. The other thing is you pick a few things that we can win on first. I always say it's kind of like being a mom. You go and you get something so that they can remember what it's like to win. And you give a few issues that they do agree on, and then you go in for the harder stuff. But they have to remember what it's like to win for the people. And in South Carolina, a lot of times I would put something out there and I would make them think it was their decision. And then I would praise them for it and have the rest of the state praise them for it. They were like, oh, let's do that again. And that's how you do it. You really do. But we have to get Congress working again. It is absolutely dysfunctional. There's no excuse why they don't balance a budget. There's no excuse why we're sitting in a deficit where they're spending more than we're bringing in. There's no excuse that they love to go on TV and squawk, but they will not get in Congress and actually pass something and do something. Think border, think healthcare, think education, think any of these things. They've done nothing. And so we will put the pressure from the outside in and remind them to get to work. And when you have a working president that's working hard, but more than that, understands bureaucracy, they'll get to work quick. You know, when I was at the United Nations, it was my first week, and there was a lot going on. So think of drinking from a fire hydrant. And somebody at the U.S. mission at the United Nations got on the phone with the press and told them what I was going to be doing. It was none of it was anything I was going to be doing. And I got so upset, and I told my team, I said, find out who that is, and I want them fired. You're never going to guess who it was. John Kerry's sister. I kid you not. She worked at the U.S. mission at the United Nations. And I said, I don't care if it's John Kerry's sister. Get rid of her. And they said, you can't. We've got her for 6 more months. And I said, you get her key pass and you get her computer, and I will pay her to sit home for 6 months. And we paid her to sit home for 6 months. And guess what? It sent a message to every other person in the U.S. mission at the United Nations that we weren't going to put up with that. And that was all we needed. You have to set the tone. You have to let them know you're going to hold people accountable, and you're going to make examples of people if you have to. And that's what I'll do as president. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I saw you in the debate. I thought you were amazing.
Thank you.
I'm here.
Thank you.
So my issue is this: Social Security. And looking at this crowd here, either we're close to it or we're there. We keep hearing that there's not enough money, and that the best answer is to make the people working work longer. I've had a job since I was 14. I've worked 40 years. I've served my country.
God bless you.
There's not an issue with enough money. It's going to the wrong people.
That's right.
We have millions of deadbeats. I know, I can count 4 right now, in their 20s. One of them's dating my daughter. Playing video games, collecting about $1,500 a month. Imagine $1 million like that. 10 million. The 5 million coming into our country illegally. The answer is not making us work harder and longer. It's getting the people off it who don't deserve it. That is just my statement. And I wish more politicians would look at it that way, because the answer is always the same. It's, we're going to raise the age, and the sheep are like, oh yeah, that sounds great. No, that's not the right answer.
And I can give you what my answer is. So first of all, when it comes to entitlements, think of this. Social Security will go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare will go bankrupt in 8. Any candidate that tells you they're not going to do anything to your entitlements, they're not going to do anything to, or they're not for entitlement reform, means that they're going to come into office and leave the country bankrupt and hop off and run, and you're going to be without anything. We will do entitlement reform, but it will be for like my kids in their 20s. You raise their retirement age to life expectancy. You go in, instead of cost of living increases, you do increases based on inflation. You expand Medicare Advantage plans. There are things that you can do, but you don't take away from anyone who's been promised. You don't extend the age date on when you can get your benefits. What you were promised, you will always get under my watch. But let me give you an example of a couple of other things that I did. When I said in South Carolina we had thousands of people on welfare, presidents meet with their governors once a year. I will meet with the governors once a quarter, Republican and Democrat, all in the name of moving that federal government down. When it came to welfare, rather than people sitting on the couch, I went to my businesses and I said, if you will take this person and train them for X weeks, I'll pay for it. And you decide at the end if you want to hire them. We moved 35,000 people from welfare to work. Wow. Sometimes you have to connect the dots. It makes no sense to pay someone to sit still, put them in training, get them the ability to do for themselves. For so many of those people, they didn't know how to get the training. They didn't know how to get the job. And those businesses were desperate for people. And so we connected the dots. Another thing I did, I became obsessed with our prisons. I wanted to know how people got in there, what happened when they were there, and what happened when they went out, because it was like a revolving cycle, and the taxpayers were paying for it. So what I did is I went in, we started giving them computer classes. We did family planning. We taught them how to build a resume, but I put equipment behind the fence, and we started teaching them skills. Now in South Carolina, when an inmate leaves the fence, they've got a job to go to the next day. South Carolina has the lowest recidivism rate in the country. Sir, it's not what I've said, it's what I've done. If you help the least of these up, the best thing you can do for anyone is get them working. Is to get them moving. One, it makes them feel like they're contributing to society, which is what America was based on. Two, it shows them what it means to be productive. But three, the most important, it breaks that generational cycle of kids seeing their parents sit on the couch. It's magic. Does it take a lot of work? Yes, it took a lot of work. Did it take a lot of effort? Yes. But do you know the taxpayer dollars we saved? But more than that, the lives we saved in the process? That's what we've got to do in our country. Every state in the country should be doing what I did. And I'm going to tell every one of them, Republican and Democrat, because guess what? That saves us all more money. And that makes us better. Where are you, Andrew?
Thank you. As an accounting professor, I'm very happy to see what you're doing with your education.
We're not as boring as they say.
No, we're not. I was at an opening game at my university for the women's soccer team. And I turned around and I saw a woman wearing a t-shirt that said, "Save Women's Sports." Would you please address that?
My daughter ran track in high school. I played tennis. In what world do we get our girls used to biological boys in their locker room? You can't. You can't do that to them. The idea of biological boys in girls' sports, I have said, I will continue to say, it is one of the biggest issues of our time. We are supposed to be growing strong girls. Strong girls become strong women. Strong women become strong leaders. But you don't do that by putting biological boys in their locker rooms. You don't do that by having biological boys play sports where they have been training all their life for that moment. And then do you know Johns Hopkins just came out with the definition of a woman? You know what they said? A non-man. Ladies, that should offend every one of you. You don't get to erase us because we don't go away that easy. So, look, I am going to fight against that every day of the week because we need to focus on what really matters. Last year, a third of our teenage girls seriously contemplated suicide. We need to be protecting them. We need to be giving them confidence. We need to let them know that there is a place for them. We don't need to be erasing them. So it just infuriates me that we're even having this conversation. I wish they would put the same energy into teaching our kids to read and write as they are in teaching them about pronouns. It's just wrong on every side.
This is time for our last question.
Oh, make it a good one.
Well, you've already kind of addressed it in a couple of the other answers, but I think it's so important, and I haven't heard enough of this in your campaign. So I'll ask it again. So, as the chief executive of this behemoth, mammoth, federal bureaucracy, and administrative state, what challenges or problems do you anticipate, and what do you plan to do about it, and how does your experience as a governor, which you started to talk about, how does that really show us that you will be able to succeed in that? It's so challenging, and how does that translate to the federal? Although it's not just about the policies, but how do you actually execute?
It's a big question, but the answer is simple, right? First, all of you should remember, America has an amazing ability to self-correct. We've seen it happen many times. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to know where up is. We're there. Now we just have to get to work and do it. I have been a 2-term governor that took a double-digit unemployment state and turned it into an economic powerhouse. I was at the United Nations. I didn't negotiate with one country, I negotiated with 193. I know what it's like to negotiate with China, Russia, deal with Iran and North Korea. This is a time where you need a president that can go and deal with both, that knows what the states are going through, that know what the enemies of our country are trying to do to us, but someone who's led something. That's the biggest thing, is you've got to have somebody who's led something. And we will not waste any time in doing that. I went through a myriad of solutions on different issues. But the biggest thing we have to do is we've got to get this primary right. You know, Joe Biden's strategist, last week, it was in the press, his strategist said, the only person we're worried about coming through that Republican primary is Nikki Haley. Because he knows I'll stomp him. And don't forget, this is not about Joe Biden. This is about electing a President Kamala Harris. That's what's going to happen. There's no way Joe Biden's going to be 86. We all see it. This is about the fact that you think it's bad now. This could get so much more worse. But we can do this. I know we can do this. And to give you a little bit of history, when I told you I ran against that 30-year incumbent in a primary years ago, people laughed at me. and I got to work, and I earned their support, and I won. When I ran for governor, I actually ran against a lieutenant governor, an attorney general, a very popular congressman, and a state senator. I was Nikki Who. I had the least amount of money in the bank. I was 3% in the polls. And I worked South Carolina like no one else, and we won. When I got to the United Nations, they said I didn't have enough experience. And I got to work and took the kick me sign off of our backs, and America was respected again at the UN. I have been underestimated all my life, and it's a blessing because it makes me scrappy. No one's going to outwork me on this. No one's going to outsmart me. We've done over 45 events here in New Hampshire, and get used to this face. Because I'm going to keep on coming back as many times to earn each and every one of your support. You don't see me coming and doing a rally and leaving. You see me going and touching every hand and answering every question and making sure that we get you the comfort you need to know that America's going to be okay, that we can do this. But I will tell you, if you've liked what I've had to say today, go tell 10 people. Tell them to go to NikkiHaley.com. Tell them to volunteer. Tell them to give $5, $10, $25. Tell them to become part of what we're getting ready to do to take America back. And if you don't like what I've had to say today, just don't say anything and don't tell anyone you were here. God bless you. Thank you so much.